Right at this exact moment, you are doing something absolutely incredible. Seriously, just by listening to my voice and processing this explainer, you are firing up this amazingly complex network of internal machinery. Your brain is paying attention, it's pulling from memory, decoding language, and ultimately making sense of the world. Today, we're going to pop open the hood and look directly at that machinery. We are diving deep into cognitive psychology, which is basically the fascinating science of how we think, how we learn, how we remember, and how we understand information.
To kind of guide our journey today, I want you to consider this central mystery. Why exactly do children think differently from adults? Think about it for a second. Is it simply because, well, a 5-year-old just hasn't lived as long and hasn't absorbed as much information? Or is it something a whole lot deeper? Could it be that the actual physical machinery of their thinking is fundamentally different from yours and mine? Keep that question in the back of your mind because I promise you the answer is going to completely change how you look at human intelligence.
Act 1. The invisible gears.
Okay, so to understand the mind, we first need to define the work it's actually doing. In the world of psychology, we call this cognition. And cognition basically refers to all those internal, invisible mental processes we use to gain knowledge and interact with our environment. There are 5 major cognitive processes: attention, memory, perception, language, and thought. You can kind of think of these as the core operating system of your daily life. They are constantly running in the background, seamlessly working together to help you navigate reality. Let's break these down one by one to see how they actually function.
Let's start with selective attention. Now, this isn't just about looking at something. It's the active ability to focus on one specific stimulus while completely ignoring a bunch of distractions. Imagine trying to listen super carefully to a really complex lecture, right? But there's a loud construction noise right outside the window. Your brain literally has to actively filter out that noise. Take a second and reflect. When you sit down to study or do some deep work, what's the thing that usually derails you? Is it your phone buzzing, a crowded coffee shop? Your ability to block all that out is step 1 of cognition. All right, so once you've actually managed to pay attention to something, it moves to our next gear, which is memory. This is the process that allows us to store and, this is the critical part, retrieve information later on. Without memory, learning would literally be impossible. Every single moment would just be a blank slate. If you're a student, especially in a high-stakes field like healthcare, your memory is your absolute lifeline. You rely on it constantly for recalling complex chemical formulas, exact procedural steps, or those really critical patient care protocols when you're in the middle of a shift. Moving right along, we have perception, which is how your brain interprets the raw information coming in from your senses. What's super fascinating here is that perception is not objective at all. It's heavily influenced by your own personal experience. For example, picture a highly trained radiographer. They can glance at a complex medical scan and instantly spot a tiny, potentially dangerous abnormality. But an untrained person looking at the exact same image, they just see a blurry sea of gray and white shapes. They are looking at the exact same picture, but their perception is entirely different because of interpretation and training. Rounding out our top 5, we've got language and thought. And these two are practically joined at the hip. Language obviously allows us to communicate our ideas, but it also actively shapes how we learn and how we think. Thought is the engine that allows us to reason, analyze situations, and solve problems. Think about those healthcare professionals again. They are using higher-order thought and language every single day to synthesize a patient's symptoms, come up with a diagnosis, and make rapid, life-saving clinical decisions. So that brings us to Act 2, meaning-making. So we've taken a good look at those microscopic gears, but now let's explore how we actually apply these processes to learn effectively in the real world. Because hey, having the gears is one thing, but knowing how to drive the machine is a whole different story. There is a really stark contrast between rote memorization and true cognitive learning. Memorization is just repeating facts over and over. It's super shallow engagement. Cognitive learning, on the other hand, requires your active participation to build deep understanding and long-term retention. Like, you could just memorize the names of structures in human anatomy. But a student who is utilizing true cognitive learning connects those structures meaningfully, which allows them to deeply interpret a live ultrasound image rather than just reciting textbook labels like a robot. Seriously, think about it for a second. Have you ever crammed for a massive exam, somehow managed to take the test, walked out of the room, and immediately forgotten literally everything you just wrote down? Yeah, we have all been there. That is the absolute perfect example of relying solely on memorization. When you don't use cognitive learning to connect new information to your existing web of knowledge, your brain essentially just dumps the data the very second it's no longer immediately useful. And that leads us to Act 3, the upgrade path.
Okay, now that we know how learning works on a sort of day-to-day level, let's zoom out to the macro perspective. We're talking about learning over an entire human lifespan. To understand this, we turn to an absolute titan of psychology, the Swiss psychologist Jean Piaget. Remember that mystery question from the very beginning about kids versus adults? Well, Piaget proved children aren't just empty little vessels waiting to be filled up with adult knowledge. They are incredibly active learners. He mapped out 4 distinct chronological stages of thinking. And at each stage, a child's worldview and logical capabilities are fundamentally different from the stage right before it. Let's walk through these major brain upgrades.
Stage 1 is the sensory motor stage, and this lasts from birth to about 2 years old. Here, infants learn entirely through their physical senses and actions, touching, looking, grasping, and of course, putting literally everything into their mouths. The major cognitive milestone of this stage is something called object permanence. See, before hitting this milestone, if you hide a toy under a blanket, the infant thinks it has completely ceased to exist in the universe. That's exactly why the game Peekaboo is so wildly thrilling to a baby. They are actively learning that just because a face is hidden, it hasn't disappeared into thin air forever.
Next up, let's compare the pre-operational stage, which is roughly ages 2 to 7, with the concrete operational stage, from ages 7 to 11. In that pre-operational stage, kids use a ton of imagination and language, but they are highly egocentric, meaning they kind of assume you see the world exactly the way they do. They also really struggle with a concept called conservation. Picture pouring water from a short, wide glass into a tall, skinny glass. A pre-operational child will swear up and down that the taller glass now has more water. But once they upgrade to the concrete operational stage around age 7, boom, logic kicks in. They look at those exact same glasses and understand that the amount of water hasn't changed at all just because the shape did. And that brings us to the final adult stage, the formal operational stage, which kicks in around age 12. This is the grand upgrade. It introduces completely abstract thinking, hypothetical reasoning, and the ability to solve highly complex problems. Suddenly, adolescents aren't just thinking about what is physically right in front of them. They can actually debate complex moral, social, and ethical issues. They can have a really rigorous debate about, say, the future implications of artificial intelligence in healthcare, exploring wild possibilities that don't even exist yet. Resolution: upgrading the framework.
So the really crucial point here is understanding exactly how we jump from one stage to the next. Piaget didn't just slap labels on these stages. He identified the actual mechanics in the brain that allow a child to actively upgrade their thinking. Step 1, you build a schema. Think of a schema as a little folder in your brain. A toddler creates a folder that says, okay, dogs are furry animals with 4 legs. Step 2 is assimilation. The toddler sees a golden retriever for the first time, notices it's furry with 4 legs, and easily files it right into that existing dog folder. But then comes step 3, accommodation. The toddler visits a farm, points at a massive cow, and yells, dog. When someone corrects them, the toddler must now accommodate this new, conflicting information by either altering their existing rules or creating a brand new mental folder altogether for cow. And all of this leads us to a concept called equilibration. Basically, this is the delicate balancing act between assimilating easy information and accommodating difficult, new information. When a child's existing schemas can no longer explain the world around them, like when the rules of those short and tall water glasses just stop making sense to them, they lose their cognitive balance. Equilibration is the powerful internal driving force that forces the brain to completely restructure its framework. It pushes the child out of their current stage and upward into a brand new, vastly more advanced stage of cognitive thinking.
Wow, okay, we have covered a ton of ground in this explainer today, from the micro gears of memory and perception, all the way to the macro upgrades of Piaget's stages. I want to leave you with a final thought to really ponder. Which cognitive process do you think you rely on the absolute most in your daily life? Are you leaning heavily on selective attention to just get through your workday, or maybe higher order problem solving to navigate complex relationships? The next time you sit down to learn something new, take a moment to observe your own mind at work. You might just catch yourself building a brand new schema. Thanks so much for joining me today, and hey, keep thinking about how you think.